All right, here we go. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this is what I just downloaded from the stream here, and it's the CH3 starter. And just what you don't want to do, and I'm mentioning this right away in regards to file management, and I say this because experience, I've seen a lot of people do this, and not just students, but some professionals too. They'll just litter stuff into their root directory. This is the root directory. This is the thing that I would zip and send somewhere else, um, if I were going to send this project somewhere. And they'll just put all their files right here in this root directory in the same folder, including image files, CSS, JavaScript, et cetera. Just going to make this huge mess of things in here. And I strongly want to encourage you guys to not do that. To start using subfolders for things. And certain things I'll require as subfolders, other things I'll just kind of recommend and suggest. One thing that I will require is the use of an images subfolder for all of your images. The only alternative is to have a folder called assets if you want to, ASSETS. And that's if you plan on also having like maybe audio and video files and you don't want to have a separate media folder, then you could call all the media files, you could put them all into a media folder, or you could call it assets. I guess those are the other two that I would accept. But other than that, while we're just using images, just use an images subfolder here. And tap my way into here, and here are some of the starting images. These are all from the textbook. We're going to be following more or less the chapter 3 with some modifications. And these are some of the images that we've got here now. We're not going to be using all of these images. I think we're using only 3 of them for right now. We're not even going to use the logo just yet. But these will be here for later on. These are all just JPEGs and one GIF. When you see a logo, generally it would be in GIF and or PNG formats. If you see photographic type images, it's generally JPEG, not always. And then this little weirdity called ICO, which is, well, we're going to save that until next week when we start doing CSS. We'll do this at the same time with Favicon. Okay, and then I've also got this resources. Remember what we were saying about the resources folder, right? This is the stuff that we're going to use in the development of the app, but they're not going to be used directly as files. Like if I were going to upload this project to a web server, I would not include the resources subfolder. I would include images, but not resources. And inside here, you might also have subfolders inside of here if you have different kind of resources. So like if I had PSD files, like large high-res files that I was using to create the JPEGs for the project, then I might have a PSD subfolder in here, or PSDs. In this case, there's just the one file here. There's just a TXT file, which we're going to be using. And I'll go ahead and open that up right now. And it'll open up in everybody's old friend, Notepad. Of course, you can open up in any text editor you want to, including your coding environment if that's what you prefer. But I kind of like to keep these separate. So this is very often, I thought this is a good example. This is directly from the textbook files. And I thought this is a good example of what content often looks like when you get it. You'll get something like this where there really isn't any indication what the structure is really supposed to be. Like, what's the hierarchy? Where's the headings? Am I supposed to be using a first level, second level, third level heading for this piece of text right here? Who knows? I'm going to have to either figure it out, or I'm going to have to call someone and ask, which is, it's usually a pain in the neck for everybody involved. If you're lucky, then sometimes you'll have a content developer who gives you something like this, which will tell you, oh, this is a second level heading or something like that. But then in that case, you have to know that when you're copying and pasting text, okay, I'm going to leave out the stuff in the brackets. That's just for me to let me know what the hierarchy is. More often, though, you get it just like this. And so you have to kind of figure it out. You say, okay, so our mission is on a line by itself. It's probably heading, right? It's probably heading for these paragraphs that follow. Here's another one, our ticket package. This is probably a heading that goes over this list of items that goes right after it, and so on. So it takes a little bit of analysis, but usually it's not too bad. Usually it's something pretty much like this. Something else that you sometimes get, which is helpful, is when they give you like a Word document where the hierarchy is there in the formatting itself. And so you can see with your own eyes what the hierarchy is supposed to be, and then you know how to translate that into the different headings levels in HTML. But yeah, usually something pretty much like this. So what we're going to do here is we are going to open up a text editor, coding environment. I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code this time around. I do want to try out the brackets thing, but I think we're going to hold off on that until next week. So I get a chance to play with it over the weekend. So this is going to be the root directory. We're going to, when we save our new HTML document, we're going to save it right into this folder where it says ch3-starter. And by the way, I think I mentioned last time, this is the punctuation that I recommend for all files that are intended to be served over a web server, is use the hyphen punctuation. Either that or use no punctuation at all. If I'd done ch3-starter without any dash in there, that would be fine. But if you are going to be using any kind of punctuation to connect different words together, then I recommend using the hyphen. It's just what you usually see. It's kind of a convention. What you don't want to do is start doing spaces in file names. Browsers have gotten very, very smart about handling those, but they really shouldn't have to. And once upon a time, with older browsers, it would break completely if you had a space in a file name, like an image that's being referenced or something like that. It would break the page entirely. It wouldn't even show up. So anyway, I'm going to pop over here. By the way, let me ask right now before we go forward, is there anyone who does not have these files, these starter files, because you will need them to follow along with me. Oh, this is our first demo here. Close that up. Okay, so everybody's got those files. You've got it unzipped and you've got them ready to go, and you've got your coding environment ready to go here. Okay, very good. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to create a new document here. Code kindly allows me to select a language, so it starts giving me some color coding right off the bat, even before I save the file, which is nice. Yeah, I think you guys said that the size of the text on here is okay for you over the screen share. So I'll go ahead and leave it as it is, but do let me know if there's ever anything that's unclear or whatever. So
yeah, I'm using code as well, and I just opened up a template instead of selecting the language because it fills in all those extra things like header, body, and all that.
The boilerplate.
Yeah.
All right, that's okay, but watch what I'm doing, and if your boilerplate doesn't look like what I'm doing, make a change. So chances are your boilerplate is smart enough to have a simple doc type declaration in here. And like I was saying, this is when this thing came along, HTML5, it was such a breath of fresh air. I should dig up the old HTML 4.01 doc type declaration we used to have to do. It was ridiculous. It was insane. It was 2 huge lines of code. Like I said, I did development for a long time, and I never did get to the point where I had fully memorized, at least not with any confidence. HTML5 came along, and boom, doc type HTML, which is what it really should have been from the beginning. So you need to have that up at the top of the page. Your page will not validate without that in there. By the way, let's go ahead and talk about this right now. What about capitalization in HTML tags? The answer is it doesn't matter at all. I could do this lowercase, I could do this uppercase, I could do both uppercase, I could do both lowercase, I could do something like this if I wanted to. I wouldn't, but yeah, you could, no problem, right? The tags, it doesn't matter. This is done this way just purely through convention, just because that's what you see out there. Everyone does it that way. Tag names themselves, it's been a long time since I saw anyone capitalize these, like anyone doing like, okay, I'm going to capitalize these like so. But there's nothing that breaks if you do it like that. I mean, it doesn't like not pass validation. In fact, we'll see an example of that a little bit later on in the demo today. So you could do that, but if you do, I'm going to give you a hard time about it. Again, not because it's wrong. Like I won't dock you points for that because it works, but I'll just, every time you do it, I'm going to mention, hey, this is, this makes your code look extremely old-fashioned, and it's been decades since I've seen anyone code this way. On the other hand, when I'm making notes or something like that, I may very well talk about the HTML tag like this and put it in all caps, just because it's the easiest way to call this out in a block of text where you're just writing code to someone. But other than that, lowercase. So remember that HTML is a markup language that, like other markup languages, is comprised of elements. Elements are considered tags, which are surrounded by those pointy brackets. Most elements in HTML, I would barely hesitate to say, are elements that have opening and closing tags. Closing tag gets the little slash, and opening tag does not. And that's just meant to make it so that you can put content in between those two, the opening and closing tag. Some tags are not that way. They're called empty tags because they don't have any content, which means they don't need a closing tag. Now, I already showed you guys a little bit about attributes as well. One of the first ones that I showed you was lang for language equals en for English. So this is the attribute name, and then you put the equals, and then in quotes you put the value. I say in quotes, I put in the double quotes. You could use single quotes if you'd like. I see hardly anybody write it this way, but I do see it occasionally. So it's not completely unheard of. You can even do this. This will not break your page. It won't break validation if you do this, unless you've got something with multiple words in it connected by spaces. Then it will break if you don't have some kind of quotes around here. But I would say, 99.9999% of developers use the double quotes like this. Note, by the way, that the closing tag does not similarly need an attribute like this. If you put it on here, it won't do anything at all. I don't know if this will break validation or not. I have a feeling it would, but I don't think I've ever tried it directly. But in any case, you do not need that on the closing tag. No point coding it.
Mr. Baseball, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
How do you get to this page that you're looking at here on the visual coder?
I actually didn't get to this page. I created a new document. So I did Control N, and then I clicked on Select a Language, typed in HTML, and then I started typing. So this is what you want to type in once you get that new document created. And I haven't even saved the document or anything yet.
Oh, okay. I got it.
Cool. Okay, so the HTML element is called the root element because it is the element in the document tree that contains all the other elements. The doc type declaration is not an element. It's a tag, but not an element. The HTML element, the root element, is going to have two children. Anybody remember what they are from last time? I know you guys can't forget these.
Is that header and footer?
Close, but it's important not to make
Head and body.
Yeah, head and body. That's it. Header is actually a different kind of tag, which we're actually going to use one of those today. And it's kind of confusing that there's a head and a header, and there are also different headings levels. They did that just specifically to mess us all up, right? So for this one, yeah, you want to do a head element and then a body element like this. So head and body are both the direct children of the root element, and those are generally, if not always, going to be the only two direct children of HTML. Because as far as I know, just about everything needs to go inside of one of these two elements. Generally speaking, the body, the stuff that goes in body is the stuff that the user of the web app sees. They actually see it in the browser window. The stuff that goes into the head element is non-visible stuff. It's meta content about the page, basically, and also like sourcing and external files and so on. The one exception is the one element that needs to be inside of head in order for it to validate, which is title. And the title element will show up in the tab of the browser. Like up here, if this were tabs in a browser, then it would show up as text up here. But it's more important than that. It's mainly for search engine optimization and so on. Now, there are different meta tags that we'll explore, but there's one in particular, what you want to make sure is in every single page that you create, char set equals UTF-8. Now it's possible that you may wind up using a different character set, I suppose. I can't imagine a system or any app in which I would ever need to, and I certainly have never had to before. Excuse me, it's always been UTF-8. The meta here, the character set meta, is supposed to go up right up at the top of the head element. Basically, you put the meta as close to the top of the page as you can. And the reason why is if the meta is not read before other elements or after a certain character count, I can't remember which one or both, it gets ignored by the page. So you really want to have this thing before anything else. And as a result, just for code organization, when we do other meta tags, you'll probably group them with this one as well. So this is usually what you see. The head opens and then you see like a series of meta tags, in this case just the one, and then the title. Underneath the title, you might have CSS files being called in through links, JavaScript files being called in through script element, those kinds of things. But we'll start with these two. So this is, just make a note for yourselves or take a screenshot or save this as a copy or something. This is basically how you want to start every single page that you guys do. It should look like this. Let's take a quick detour here. What about white space? I'm putting in like extra returns in between elements here and here, but not like in between parent and child. Is that a deal? No, it's my own coding style. This, after years of coding HTML, is what I've settled on as the thing that's easiest for me to read and understand. If you have a way that's easier for you to read and understand, then that makes perfect sense to me. The only thing that I'm going to give you a hard time about is if you don't do consistent indenting. So every time an element is a child of another element, indent one. I don't care if you use spaces or tabs. I do care that you indent, though. So like if you took this, as some people will do, including like some of the script examples from the website, or sorry, the textbook. If you had something like this, there are a lot of developers out there who find this hard to read, and that's why it's not considered to be okay. So you always want to do indenting. Make sure you're consistent with that. Let's see, what else before we go on? Okay, so nesting. When we've got elements nested inside other elements, the nested element needs to close before the parent element closes. So for instance, you will never see something like this, where the head opens and then the title opens and then the head closes and then the title opens or closes in the same order, right? Because it's got to do in reversed order. It's like nested Russian boxes or Russian dolls or something like that, right? One of them has to close before you can put the next one in or the next one around it. So just remember, they close in the opposite order from which they open. So head open and then title, reverse that when closing them, title closes and then head. Same thing with these guys. The head had to open and close, body open and close, and then you can close the parent HTML element. I think that is enough. We haven't done a comment yet, but we'll do that at some point. Let me go ahead and save this guy. Now, when you're saving a file, let's see, I need to find my new root directory here. Unit 2 and ch3 starter, which I may rename later on, right? Because I think Bispo asked for last names first, but for now it's okay. Just use ch3 starter. What to name this guy? Well, if you know that the page that you're saving is going to be the home page, which in this case it is. This is going to be the home page of a little website that we'll work on for a while. The home page is always named index. Always, always, always. Unless you're using a JavaScript routing system or whatever. If you're using flat HTML or if you're using PHP, then your home page is going to be called index. Index.html or index.php. There is nothing else you can name this and have it work. Here's why. When we upload this to a web server, it's going to be looking for those file names. When a user requests the home page of your website, it's going to look in your home public directory and it's going to look for something called index. And if it doesn't find something called index, then instead of serving a single page as the home page, it's just going to show the user a list of files. And maybe if we remember at some point, once we start looking in the browser, I'll show you an example of this. You guys have probably all seen it at some point or another. And when I show you, it'll be like, oh yeah, I've seen that before. And that's when either you requested something other than the home page, or the home page simply wasn't there. So make sure you always call it index. It used to be once upon a time that web servers would accept home. So there were 4 things you might see. You might say index.html, index.php, or home.html and home.php. But it's been a long time since I've encountered a web service system that would use those as home pages. And I know it's confusing because we say home page instead of index page usually, but just remember to call it index always. That's something that I will dock you for. Although when I say I'll dock you guys stuff, I mean I will always allow, if you submitted something on time, I'll always allow revisions and resubmissions. So, oh yeah, Bispo took a point off because I don't have an index page. Just rename the page and turn it in again. It might not be quite so easy. If you've got links, hyperlinks referencing the home page, then you might have to change those as well, or else they'll break. But more about that later. So save this as index.html. Put it inside your root directory, not inside images or resources. Save it, and we are ready to go forward. At this point, I will probably bring up my little preview over here. Any questions so far?
You didn't check out that other previewer, did you?
Oh, like the live server? No, I didn't get a chance to try the live. I do have a live PHP server on the other machine, but it seems overly complicated. So I'll have to try that live server and see it. One of the things that makes me interested in brackets is that it seems to just have it. Like you don't have to install it as an extension, and it's not anything complex. You just kind of click a button and open up a browser, and then it's ready to go. So
how did you bring up the preview?
Let's see. I've got this may be an extension over here, but I've got this little guy over here with the magnifying glass. And let's see. I wonder if this guy will do it. No, this will just open up a second one here. So this must be the, let's see, HTML preview. Is this the one? This is the one
I think I installed live preview, yeah.
Yeah, it's either preview or HTML preview or one of those guys that I installed to get this guy over here. Let's see if I hover over
Live
it.
preview works.
Yeah, if you want to just get the live preview, then that'll work.
I did that one because it says Microsoft.
Yes, it does. You're right. Okay, I will install that when we get into lab tonight. I will try it out. Promise. I get rather lazy about such things.
Hey, if it works, it works. Why? If it works, why fix it?
What I like of the ones that I've used in the past where it sniffs out changes in the files and like automatically refreshes the browser every time it detects a change in any of the dependency files, I like that. That's cool.
That's what live preview does.
That's what live preview does. Okay, cool. I will definitely try it out then because I like that.
Because it's a live preview.
Right. All right, let's go ahead and go further. So if you don't have the c3 content.txt open, now is the time to open it. Like I said, it doesn't matter what you open it in. And I'm going to start copying and pasting this text into our HTML document, and we're going to start marking it up, as they say. We're going to create the hierarchical elements, which are the text elements, like H1, H2, H3, paragraph, list, items, those kinds of things. And we're also going to use some structural elements. So structural elements, they fall into one or two camps, as you might know from the reading. And you will know if you do the reading review and focus on those other figures that I talked about. Once upon a time in HTML4, we had one kind of structure other than the document structuring itself, which was a div. And that was it. Like everything went into a div. And if you wanted to give a name to the div of any sort at all, then you had to add a class or an ID, which, we still use those a lot. But those were like the only tools that you had. So like instead of having a header element, you had to have a div, and then you might say div ID equals header, div ID equals footer, that sort of thing. And that was really the only way to make them distinct from each other. Now we've got in HTML5, and for the last 10 years or so at least, more like 15, we've got some of those elements. They're called semantic structural elements. Semantic simply means that the tag or the attribute says something about the kind of content that's in there. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the 3 that are most common that you see inside the body element here. I'm going to have a header element. Note the difference between this and the head element, which goes up here outside of the body. Header. Then there's a main element. The main element is kind of like what it sounds like. It is meant to it's meant to house the main content of a web page. And the way to think about what the main content is in a web page is it's the stuff that changes from page to page if you've got a multi-page website that you're doing. The stuff inside header tends to not change. It tends to be the logo, tagline, stuff like that. The stuff in the footer, which I'll put in next, also tends not to change. That might be, I don't know, copyright information, a site descriptor, a date, it could be a list of secondary links, small type, whatever. That's the stuff that tends to go on every page. Stuff in the main element is the stuff that changes from page to page. It's the main content. So the footer here, I'll put down at the bottom. And then we'll start getting these guys in here. So normally what you see, well, let me go ahead and do the title element first because we've got to have some content in here before we do anything else. I'm going to pop back over to the text. San Joaquin Valley Town Hall. This, when it's up near the top or at the top, you can generally take this as being the website name or at least the web page name. In this case, I think it is the website name. So I'm going to copy that and I'm going to put that into the title. Oops. Let me try that again. Copy, paste. There we go. Now, there are other things that may go into here. Sometimes you see the website name and then a dash or a colon and then the page name. If you're going like on your contact page, it might say San Joaquin Valley Town Hall contact or something like that. But if you want a simple solution for what goes in the title without having to worry too much about SEO, then you just go ahead and just put in the website name up here. Now, normally speaking, in the header element, there's going to be an H1, a top-level heading at the top of the page, that also has the same text in it. It's the website name. In this case, like I told you, I'm trying to follow the book examples as much as possible. And they have got a slightly different structure that they're using, which is, it's not the way I would do it, but there's nothing really wrong with it. It's just not what I'm used to. So instead of an H1, we're going to put an H2 up here and paste that same thing in there. So whether it's an H1 or an H2, this is what you usually will see. There's the title, website name, and then a heading up near the top with the same text in it. And this is nice for SEO, right? SEO bots like to see this kind of duplicated content in the important sections of the website. And then underneath that, you get a tagline generally, something like that, which often will be in a paragraph. In this case, it's a third level heading. So an H3 here. And popping back over to the text, celebrating our 75th year. So grab that line, copy and paste it into the H3. One thing I do like about the way that they have structured this in the textbook, I don't know if this is the reason why they do it this way or not, but it reinforces the idea, I think, that the H levels do not need to be sequential. They should not be sequential. Like you don't start with an H1 and then do an H2, H3, H4, H5, etc., all the way down the page. I've had a lot of students who want to do that, and it's not the way. You think about it hierarchically instead. And if it's simpler to think of it this way, think about it in terms of the size of the type. That's not really the right way to think of it, but just to start with, it's not bad to think of it like that. While I go here, I'm going to be throwing in little Easter eggs for you guys. So we're doing structural elements and hierarchical elements here, but every so often, let's take a look at span or strong or something like this. So my little Easter egg for this one, 75th here, I'm going to take the TH and make it smaller and higher the way you would normally see it. So there is an element in HTML that I think of this as the sup element, but it stands for superscript. And if I cut and paste the TH of 75th in there, then you can see it just does a little bit of that formatting for you. Now let's keep going with the headings. So we've got H2 and H3 up inside header. They're also going to have a few headings inside main. So let me pop open main here. And let's grab these other things. So like our mission, we were saying, our ticket packages, and this season's guest speakers. These are going to be our 3 headings inside of the main element. So our mission, I'm going to copy that, and that is going to be an H2. There it shows up. Our ticket packages, same thing, copy that, come back over here, make another H2 beneath the other one, paste in as the content. And then the last one here, this season's guest speakers. This is what they're using as the main title of the page, which is why they're putting this one into the H1 instead of having the website name in the H1, the way I think you would normally see it. So I'm going to put this as an H1. Notice that this one is the largest text on the page, and then the H2s are the next size down, and then the H3 is smaller than that still, roughly reflecting the hierarchy, the level of importance of each of these, H1 being the most important, then the H2s, and then the H3s. And by the way, this is also an SEO thing. So, you know, after taking a look at the title and so on, a Google bot will crawl through the page, and they'll notice the H1, and if this is the only H1 on the page, then they'll say, aha, this is the most important piece of content on this page. So it's not just for how the users interact with the content, it's also how machine systems interact with the content. And that, I think, is all the headings on the page. Is anybody struggling with any part of this, getting this in? It's just kind of some copying and pasting so far, but if anybody's stuck, we can hold up for a minute.
Nope, easy peasy.
Nope, everybody good. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and deal with some of the body copy. So body copy is just like the level of text that's not a heading. It's the stuff that is intended to be read through, although on the web you have to pretty much resign yourself to the fact that your text is going to be scanned and it's not actually read by most of your users. But you can kind of look and say, okay, this is body copy here, right? That's too much text for a heading. This is body copy here. It's another paragraph. This is body copy. It's a list of things. And this one, it could either go either way, these guys. I think the textbook wants these to be H3s, so we'll do them that way. And then this is another paragraph that goes inside the footer down here. So let's tackle these one at a time. I'm going to grab this first paragraph here. By the way, you can, like if you want to, you can grab both of these at the same time and copy and paste them in. I don't find that to be the most efficient thing for myself, at least. I like to grab them one at a time. And I suppose unless it were an absolutely huge page, or if I were copying in several paragraphs of lorem ipsum text or something like that, but usually I just go ahead and do it like this. So this goes under our mission. Yeah. Okay, so a paragraph is just a P tag. And you will never forget that now. Anybody remember off the top of their head how I get this to wrap text?
View wrap text probably.
Yeah, okay. Word wrap. There we
Word
go.
wrap, yes, at the very end.
Cool. That's better.
My goodness, that was so difficult. Now, is there a difference between capitalization, like capital P versus a lowercase p, or?
No, it's the same thing as with the dog type up here. You could do these as capital P's. In fact, they don't even have to match. You could do a capital P for one and a lowercase p for the other one.
How did you wrap the text again? Just trying to see what you clicked.
View menu, as someone recommended, and then word wrap here.
Alt-Z for the shortcut.
Dun, 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 dun.
Huzzah. list that under the menu command? Yes, it did. Technically, P tags don't even need to be closed. I believe this will still pass validation, but no one wants to look at that. Everybody wants to see the tags closed if there is a closing tag. Okay, so let's do another little Easter egg of formatting here. We did the sup element or superscript. Let's go ahead and make this bold. Now, there's a couple of different ways to make text bold. One, there is a B tag that you can use, like this. This one's not generally recommended for most things because, remember I was saying that like the H1 here is not just to make the text big for the human users, but it has a special meaning for bot crawlers. Same thing here. If you put something in a B tag to make it bold, the crawlers will think that's just that's like a visual like formatting thing, and they won't pay any attention to it. However, if I instead create a strong element, then it'll do the same thing visually. See, it makes it bold, but this also will mean something to the search bots. They will look at something called strong and say, this word is supposed to be, or this phrase is supposed to be strongly emphasized. And so it will give special emphasis to this in search engine rankings as well. So it's something to pay attention to. This is that word semantic again. Strong is a slightly more semantic version than bold because it says at least that the text inside is supposed to be emphasized as opposed to just, make this stuff bold. If that doesn't make sense yet, don't worry about it. But this is why you see strong instead of the B tag a lot. Same thing with EM emphasis versus I, which would just be italic. Okay, next block of text here. Each year I give a ticket package to each of our family members. I'm going to copy this guy. Now this could go into another paragraph. That wouldn't be a problem. But there is another kind of element here, a block level element that is intended for this exact kind of thing. It's intended to display quotes. Now this is what one of the members told us, right? And this is a quote from a member. So instead of a P tag, I'm going to do a block quote. And you can see it gets a little formatted a little bit differently here. But again, it's semantic, right? It tells the search bot that, there is a quote in here from somebody or another. And so it'll treat that a little bit differently in its rhythm, whatever that word is. Algorithm. Now, as long as we're doing Easter eggs, let's go ahead and do some special characters. So special characters or HTML entities are ways of doing special characters that are not within the simple character set that we're using. We could just do like shift quote if we wanted straight quotes around this thing. They're not very typographic. They look more like inch marks than actual quote marks. So what happens if we want like curly quotes at the beginning here and curly quotes at the end, like true opening and closing typographic quotes? What we have to do is a special character or HTML entity for that, all of which start with ampersand and end with a semicolon. And then you can get to the different ones by changing the code that goes inside of here. So I'm going to do, let's see, LDQUO inside of here, and that stands for left double quote. LDQUO. And I don't know what you can see is we're going to open up in the browser in just a moment here, and we should get a better look there. But this is the sixes of the sixes and nines, right? It's the opening curly quotes here. I will do the closing quotes down here. You guys can probably guess what it's going to be. It starts with the ampersand and ends with the semicolon. Instead of an LD quo for left double quote, we're going to do RD quo for right double quote. RD quo. And there it is. And now to give you guys a better look, let me go ahead and save this thing. And let's crack this open in a browser here. So I just double clicked on it. And then if you want to see this in a little bit closer, that's what I mean by open and closing quotes there. Those are true typographic quotes and not just the straight quotes that are used for inches or, degree minutes, that sort of thing. Or I guess it's seconds. There we go. So these are the ones that we just did. Those are our first two special characters. Let's do one more. We're going to be putting in the last of the paragraph type blocks into the footer here, and then we'll come back and do those lists of things here. So this is, let's see, where am I? I want my text. There it is. This guy down here, C2018, blah, 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 Fresno, California, blah, blah, blah. So this guy right here, the C inside parentheses, you see this a lot when you're receiving content from somebody. And this is meant to be the copyright symbol, obviously. So the copyright symbol is a C that's surrounded by a circle. And if the content developer doesn't know how to create one of those, they'll do this. They'll put a regular C inside parentheses. But it's really supposed to be the copyright symbol. So let's go ahead and grab that, copy it, and inside the footer now, down here, let's put another paragraph and paste this stuff in there. And we're going to replace this C in parentheses with an actual copyright symbol. I'll put it right after so you can see the difference between them here. As all entities, you start out with the ampersand and with a semicolon. Oops. And then in between this one's really easy to remember. Just type in copy and copy. And there you see, you get that symbol over here. Now the nice thing about these is these are intended to be universal. So they, like, if you go to, like if your website gets viewed on a Windows machine or a Mac machine, it doesn't matter. They will both understand what and copy means as an HTML entity. Whereas if I go to the Mac and I type in Option G, which is how you get this symbol on a Mac, and then I just put that up in a website, everyone who comes in the Windows machine, they'll see one of those little boxes with a question mark, which means we can't find what that symbol is. We have no idea what that is. But this guy and copy, that'll be understood by every system. Now I can get rid of that guy, and we've got the actual copyright symbol there. These are the three of the entities that I would most recommend getting to know. There's plenty of other ones for like M dashes, N dashes, ellipses. There's all kinds. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of them. You'll never be able to memorize all of them. These three are the ones that I personally use the most often that I would recommend knowing and memorizing. Like I said, this one you'll never forget in a million years. This one, just use them a couple of times and then you'll remember them. Okay, how we doing? Everybody doing good? We're burning through this. We're going quicker than I thought we would. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and go forward then. I'm going to see, it's about 5 minutes to 7, so we've got a few minutes left before it's time for a break. Let's get the rest of the content in here, and then we can take a break and come back and see what else we might want to do to this in order to really tighten it up. So I'm going to, back to my content, and our ticket packages. So this looks like it's supposed to be some kind of list of things. So there are three basic kinds of lists in HTML that you're going to come across. And really, you're going to come across two of them a lot, and the other one hardly ever. One of them is an unordered list. And what that word means is that the order of these things doesn't strictly matter, right? It could be in any order. And I would think that because like there isn't even an order on the dollar amounts here, right? So they could really be put in any order and it wouldn't break anything. That's the way it's going to be formatted by the browser, is that it's going to have bullet points at the beginning of each list item. If you have an ordered list, on the other hand, then you get numbers at the beginning, like numerals, 1 dot, 2 dot, 3 dot, and so on. And that means that there is an implied order to this, and things will be broken if you change the ordering around. So from this, I would say this is going to be an unordered list, right? The ordering doesn't seem to matter on this too much. That doesn't mean I'm going to deliberately and capriciously mix this up. But yeah, it just content-wise, structuring-wise, it doesn't really make any difference what order they're in. So let's go ahead and pop this over here. So this is going to be the first list that we do. And that's underneath what? Ticket packages. Our ticket packages. So I think most of these element names, most of these tag names are pretty easy to remember, like the H levels, which I don't know if I've mentioned this before. By the way, you only have 6 of them available in HTML. There's H1 through H6. That's really the only thing you have to remember about those, and then they're easy enough to remember. Like P for paragraph, like, yeah, you'll never forget that, right? So if I say, okay, go ahead and make an unordered list here, there's only so many things that it's going to be. Given the fact that most of these hierarchical elements are pretty short, other than the block quote, it'd probably be a pretty safe bet to think, yeah, it's probably a UL for unordered list. And then if later on I tell you to make an ordered list, you could probably say, oh, well, that's probably an OL. So I'm going to be putting in some list items into our UL unordered list here. Anybody have a guess what the tag is for list item, given what we just talked about?
LI.
LI. Ding, ding, ding. There it is.
Say L1.
By the way, the third kind of list, depending on who you ask, is a data list, definition list, or description list, or dictionary list. Everybody has a different, but it's a DL, basically, instead of an OL or a UL. And that's the only one where you do not have LIs inside. We may go over that one, but I doubt we'll have time for it. Really, you see it so seldom. UL and OLs you run into all the time, and those both use LIs, list items, structure's the same, so they're easy to remember. So I'm going to grab these. You guys know I like to do these one at a time. Just going to copy that, paste it into my LI, and then I'll make another LI. You can see it now has that list item with a bullet point at the beginning. Let's make the second one. For whatever reason, when I'm doing list items, I don't tend to put double returns in between those like I do the rest of the stuff. I don't know why. I do not. I guess I just never seen it like that. And there's my second LI. And then the single speaker for 25 bucks. That would be more my speed. Paste it on in there as well. And we've got our 3 list items here. Let's see what it looks like as an ordered list. All we have to do is change UL to OL, and there it goes. 1, 2, 3. I don't even have to change the closing tag, although really I do, because it won't validate like this. But just to see what it looks differently, there's 1, 2, 3 instead of ... And by the way, there's tons of stuff that we can do to lists once we get into CSS formatting. There's so many things you can do with lists. You can have them Roman numeraled, uppercase or lowercase, Arabic Roman numeraled, uppercase, lowercase. You can have like a leading 0 on these if you wanted to. You could do like, I don't know, lower Greek if you want. There's a gazillion different things you can do with lists in CSS. But for now, there's just these 2 things, OL or UL, each one of which has LI list items inside of it. Now the final thing for our content is going to be these. Let's see, I keep doing, well, now that I'm here, let's go ahead and refresh. And there's the stuff. The last little 3 pieces of text here are the 3 of the season's guest speakers for October, November, and January. I guess there's no guest speaker for December. So let's go ahead and copy the first one. I'm going to grab both of these lines of text. They clearly belong together. They're supposed to be like on 2 lines of the same block of text. And let me see, what is the textbook? Yeah, the textbook wants us to do H3s here. So this is going to be underneath the season's guest speakers. Let's put an H3 and paste. And let's do the same thing for Andrew Ross Sorkin on November. Copy both of those lines. Make an H3 and paste. Finally, January, Amy Chua. Be careful, it wants to knock you, because this is indented, it's going to want to stay indented, but do not allow these to continue indenting further, because these are all on the same level. These are all children of the main element, so they should all be on the same indent level here. Now this has an important lesson regarding white space that goes along with it. I don't know if this is what the chapter intended, but I think it's worth pointing out here. This is split up onto two lines, right? There has been either a hard or a soft return here, and then so October and Jeffrey Toobin are on different lines. November and Sorkin are on different lines. Take a look at our preview over here. Did it put those onto different lines? It did not, did it? It's got those all on the same line. Let's pop over to the browser and see if it feels any differently about it. Oh, I must not have saved here. Save and refresh. No, it's not putting those under different lines, right? It's putting Jeffrey Toobin on the same line as October. So what gives? Well, this is one of the weird things about HTML. As far as I know, markup languages in general, they don't care about white space. They don't even notice it. So I could put in like a whole ton of returns in between those two lines. Nothing's going to happen over here. I could put a bunch more returns in between elements. Nothing's going to happen over here. And that's by design, right? That's the feature that we're looking at. So this one here, basically any white space at all in between text content, pieces of text content, it thinks of them all the same way. Any amount of white space between October and Jeffrey is going to be rendered as a single space, and that's it. So if I take this whole thing and just put a space in between them, zero change over here. By the way, there are plenty of people when they're starting out like, oh yeah, I want to indent this by putting a bunch of spaces. Guess what? It's not going to work. It's not going to do anything over here. I'm going to save this and check it in the browser too. Same thing. No difference, right? So just remember that white space is not accounted for at all. You could, if you wanted to, and if you were this kind of crazy, you could type everything on a single line and have that line stretching out, you know, a couple of thousand characters or whatever, and that would be your HTML page. And it could be, as long as you put spaces in between the words that you needed to, then it would be rendered exactly the same way. Likewise, you could put every single character on a line by itself and wind up with like 50,000 lines of code here or whatever. And again, it would render exactly the same way. There would be no change whatsoever. It's worth making note of that right at the beginning so that you don't try to do stuff like this and wonder why it's not working. It won't work. So what do you do if you want to get those guys onto different lines? Well, I could put them into separate H3s, but then I would probably get more space between them. Notice like different headings here between the H2 and the H3. It's got this big gap in here. I don't want that. I just want them on different lines, like the content manager suggested here. So there's an element called an inline element that you can put inside of a tag. By the way, this is like the strong element. This is also an inline element. It goes inside the P element. So let's do one here, and this is going to be a line break, which you might think, okay, Bispo, I know what this is. This is an LB, right? No, it's not. It's just BR for break. And looky there, we split them up onto a couple of different lines. So go ahead and do that with each of these. Get rid of all this extra space in there, which we don't need. Actually, you could leave it there if you wanted to. It doesn't matter. And just put a BR. And then finally, same thing for Konnichiwa. And there we go. We got those guys on different lines. Okay, and that brings us to the end of the first part of the demo. This is the end of part one. I think we have gotten all of the text content in here that we need to. We've copied and pasted every bit of this guy here. We haven't left anything out. At this point, I can go ahead and close this document. Don't need it anymore because we've already got it in here. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, there's some other stuff I want to show you, even though it's not immediately going to be useful to what we're doing tomorrow for lab, but it is covered by the chapter. So I do want to get some of that stuff in, which is we are going to use a few of those images inside the images subfolder. We're going to put a picture of each of these guest speakers right above the H3 for each of those. There's one for Toobin, one for Sorkin, and one for Chio. We'll get those in. And then these pieces of text here, we're also going to create hyperlinks of those. So what that means is that they will show up with the blue and the underline, and the user will know that I can click on that and it will take me somewhere else. And we'll create a quick boilerplate page for each of these speakers just so that we don't have broken links. So we'll actually have a tiny bit of like a website here. Hopefully we'll get to that before the end. If not, that's okay. We can leave that for next week, no problem. So any questions before I call on into the first portion of the demo here? Or not the demo, the exercise.
I understand why we're doing this right here all manually here, but isn't the normal way that people do this now? I mean, granted, this is a really static web page as it stands right now, but don't they just use an object-oriented drag and drop text editor? I mean, shoot, I could do this right here in Microsoft Word and save as a HTML and look just the same, right?
Theoretically, Microsoft Word and tools like it tend to create an awful lot of HTML. I mean, to the point where it can actually affect the performance of even a simple web page like this. One thing it's been a long time since I've done it, but one thing I used to have my students do in HTML class is go into Microsoft Word, type in Hello World, and then save it as a web page, and then open up the code in a text editor and see how much junk it made. So even though it's been a long, I don't think I have Word on this machine, actually. I'll try it on my other machine and see how it does, but I'm expecting the same thing now, even though it's been years since the last time I tried it. So this page, I believe, will be a lot cleaner than if we get if we get Microsoft Word or a similar tool in order to do this for us. Now, one thing that I do use sometimes is a coding environment called Markdown instead of Markup, which is lightweight markup, which means that I can type this. I mean, as simple as HTML is, it does have a lot of tags that you have to put in. It's a little bit verbose for what it does. So Markdown is a way of doing this whole thing much, much more simply, and then exporting very simply as HTML. And it does a really good job for that. At some point, I might show you guys that, but it's something I introduced in one of the database classes because it's an easier way of planning tables and so on than using HTML. Now, there are also website builders like Webflow and Squarespace and, God forbid, Wix that, yeah, a lot of people are doing these days. And if you guys were non-coders, like the times that I've taught, like, okay, web portfolio class for like industrial designers or whatever, which I've done before, and they've never done any coding, then yeah, I take them right into Webflow and I let them do it that way. But you guys are well familiarized with coding, and so I think that this is probably going to be the most comfortable thing for you, at least to start out with.
So Hello World ends up being 50 lines.
Oh, well, they've certainly improved that a lot. That's still an awful lot of lines, but I'm pretty sure it used to be quite a bit more than that. Maybe I can even dig one of those up from one of my ancient instruction folders on my other machine. Maybe. That would be fun if I could. All right, good. Other questions?
No questions here.
Okay. Notice, by the way, speaking 50 lines of code, even with all of the extra double returns in here, our whole page is less than that with all the content that we've got in here. So I rest my case. If you guys want to go ahead and take yourselves on a 10-minute break, come back, say at, well, it's 7:12, come back, don't wait longer than 7:25, 7:23, something like that. I'll go ahead and take this first recording and start getting it crunched down on YouTube, and then we will do one more recording after this. Get the images in there, maybe some hyperlinks if we feel like we've got the energy and the time. And then I also want to review page validation, because that's going to be uber important. Okay, cool. I will see you guys in 10.